that the president even has to go to the length of working with the legal team and the Office of Management and Budget to identify these funds. It is the job of Congress to fund these agencies. And Democrats in Congress have voted 7 times against funding the Department of Homeland Security. Congress should come back and they should get it done.
Meanwhile, the head of one airline says if Congress can't pay TSA agents, then they'll have to stand in line at the airport like everyone else. Delta CEO Ed Bastian says they're ending the perks for members of Congress, which, among other things, allowed them to bypass security lines, but not anymore.
Well, given the lack of leadership that we've seen coming from our elected officials, the fact that we would continue to extend courtesy opportunities for them to bypass the mess that they've created, we want to make sure they understand what they're and stand in line just like everybody else.
How long will the pause continue for those perks?
At a minimum, until everything is back and running normally, the workers are paid, and at that point we'll decide whether we continue it.
House Speaker Mike Johnson thinks it's a good idea.
I agree 100%. The airlines are right. I mean, there are some occasions where members of Congress get escorted around for security reasons at heightened threat environments and all that kind of stuff. But my members don't do that. They don't skip the line. They're crazy. They represent their constituents. So if anybody's been taking advantage of a perk like that, bad luck, obviously.
President Trump says he would like to take the oil in Iran and possibly the island the country uses to export it to the rest of the world. Steve Jordahl has more.
President Trump told the Financial Times that he could seize Iran's oil and take Kharg Island, the export hub the regime uses to send its oil around the world. The comment has both the president's political friends and his enemies concerned that this has turned into a war for oil, an accusation the left tried to hang around President Bush's neck during the Iraq War. But retired U.S. Marine Colonel Grant Newsham says if President Trump were to take the oil, he would have an ace up his sleeve.
When you have control over a good chunk of the world's oil, or the people who produce it, that gives you political influence over countries like, obviously Iran, but China, even Russia to a degree, but certainly Cuba as well.
Analysts are also debating whether seizing Kharg Island would qualify as, quote, boots on the ground, shorthand for a long and involved war, something President Trump specifically campaigned against in the run-up to his second term. Newsham says the numbers of troops in or on their way to the region are nowhere near what would be needed for an invasion of Iran.
At best, we're talking about some short-term raids, places to take or control a piece of territory or to grab something.
He says to this point in the campaign, he sees nothing that would point to an Iraq or Afghanistan-style war with no end in sight.
It's not a war exactly for oil in the sense that, say, you would hear that used at, say, a No Kings protest. But it is a way to give America the ability to influence its enemies.
I'm Steve Jordahl. Wall Street is rebounding early, and oil prices are holding above $100 a barrel as the U.S. and Iran trade military strikes in the 5th week of the war. Futures for the S&P 500 and the Dow each rose 0.9%. The NASDAQ futures climbed 0.8%. Benchmark U.S. crude oil rose 75 cents to $103.63 per barrel. More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty P.
AFA Action takes attacks on the family seriously. The enemies of the family constantly employ new tactics to try to sneak past our radar. They know if we stand together, their evil plans will fail. Your gift to AFA Action allows us to stay vigilant against their onslaught. And if you give this month, you'll receive access to the Cultural Institute video When Your Faith is Illegal by Frank Harbor on AFA Stream as our thanks. You can make your gift today at afaaction.net. From the big screen to the TV screen to our phone screen, you can't hide the fact that media plays a huge role in today's society, and it shows no signs of slowing down. Movies, documentaries, and animated features are everywhere, and we can't forget audio, music, podcasts. Where does it end? American Family Studios was started to take society's obsession with media and turn it into a ministry opportunity. What better way to advance the Christian worldview than to use movies, TV shows, and audio to get the message across? Quality is of the utmost importance, so our post-production facility has the equipment and space required to fill a wide range of needs, including a studio that can accommodate a live audience. The state-of-the-art facility has been used to create God Speaks, Summer Snow, I Am Potential, and Ryan DeFrady's Secret Agent, and that's just scratching the surface. Stay up to date on what's coming next and get to know us better at AmericanFamilyStudios.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Victor Davis Hanson wrote about our new ungracious immigrants. He wisely began by reminding us of the positive impact of immigrants that have given us such high-tech benefits as eBay, Google, NVIDIA, SpaceX, Stripe, Sun Microsystems, Tesla, Yahoo, and a host of others. He also reminds us of the immigrants in the past who were thrilled to be in America and became hyper-patriotic. But something has changed. He takes a few pages to remind us of immigrants who hate America and lead groups to bring down the current political and economic systems that have provided for so many citizens. Then he turns to the harsh reality of many of these new Americans who are bent on killing other Americans. This month in March provides sufficient examples. On March 1st, a Muslim from Senegal wearing a Property of Allah sweatshirt shot up a beer garden in Austin, Texas, killing 3 and wounding 14 others. A few days later, sons of immigrants from Turkey and Afghanistan threw IEDs at a protest in New York City with the hope of killing more people than were killed at the Boston Marathon. Later that week, a Muslim from Sierra Leone went into an ROTC meeting at the Old Dominion University and murdered the instructor. The same day, a Muslim from Lebanon drove his car rigged with explosive fireworks into Temple Israel in Michigan. He also reminds us that not all of the killings are intentional. Thousands of driver's licenses have been issued to both illegal aliens and legal residents from all over the world, including those who cannot understand English, cannot pass a commercial driver's test, and are utterly unqualified to drive. As many examples illustrate that we have a flawed immigration system that needs to be fixed. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
Jenna Ellis in the morning on American Family Radio.
I love talking about the things of God because of truth and the biblical worldview. The U.S. Constitution obligates our government to preserve and protect the rights that our founders recognize come from God, our Creator, not our government. I believe that Scripture in the Bible is very clear that God is the one that raised up each of you, and God has allowed us to be brought here to this specific moment in time.
This is Jenna Ellis in the morning.
March 31st, and the beginning this week of Holy Week, which will, of course, culminate in Good Friday and then the blessed hope of Easter Sunday morning. I love how my church here in Florida, for those of you who've been listening for the last several years, know how my church in Florida does our Easter services. We go on Good Friday to the right up to the moment of Jesus's death on the cross, and then say, but Sunday is coming. And then everyone just quietly leaves, and it almost feels like a funeral procession, and then gather at sunrise Sunday morning to celebrate the truth of the resurrection of Christ. And Troy Miller, our good friend who is the president of the National Religious Broadcasters, wrote a really excellent article that you need to read in Newsmax this week. It's titled "Nation Strength Grounded in Strong Families." And he begins that the condition of the American family remains deeply sobering as Holy Week, of course, begins in 2026. Decades of radical individualism, no-fault divorce laws shattering lifelong covenants, welfare policies disincentivizing marriage, feminist ideology, branding biblical masculinity as toxic, and big tech algorithms replacing human connections with screens, pornography, and isolation have severely weakened the family unit. And I can think of even more things than that, but that is certainly enough of a list. And a structure that once served as the bedrock of the American society is no longer the fulcrum. And so then he goes into a lot of the data and talking about the sharp decline of U.S. households. And I was actually reading a piece that said that the rise of single women who are homeowners is on the rise because no one is getting married anymore. So let's welcome in Troy Miller. And Troy, this is a really important thing to highlight on Holy Week, I think, especially because
we tend to focus so much in American society in particular on the rights of the individual that it's almost like it's such hyper individualism that we forget that the context of the individual exercising our rights really is designed for and should be in the context of the family.
Yeah, thank you, Jenna, for having me today. And you're exactly right. We're celebrating the 250th. If you go back to, some of the, aspirations and the hopes that the Pilgrims had when they came over was all centered around their families. They were coming over because of some of the oppression in Europe to be able to live out the lives they wanted to and to their conscience, and came over with this great American experiment that was really founded on the fundamental base of the family, that the family was center to society and the core of a successful growing society.
Yeah, and we have somehow in the 250 years of American history that we're celebrating also this year in 2026, we've somehow lost to that. And what do you really attribute that to? I mean, we can go through all the statistics and things like no-fault divorce and the rise of the sexual revolution in the 60s and many other things, but beyond just law, I mean, law and policy is often a reflection of the culture and what people are already clamoring for. And so where do you think we've kind of lost the way as a society on the emphasis of the family?
Yeah, all of those things, as you said, contribute to it, the policies of the country, the laws of the country. But I think the real core base of it, unfortunately, Jenna, I think a lot of it goes back to what we teach in the church and how we teach the family as being the base. We do a lot of things. Churches have a lot of programs. We have youth programs. We have other things, but we really don't reinforce that the strength of the family is found in the mother and the father and holding families together, and that the responsibility for the family really lies in the home. And unfortunately, in our consumer-driven, culture over the last 5 decades or so, 50 years, we've moved that into the family as well as where we want to outsource everything. We outsource education to the government. We have outsourced religious teaching sometimes to the church. And we don't have enough of families themselves who are just concentrating, that parents that this is my responsibility. This is my responsibility to teach my kids, to hold my family together, and to pass along family values. That's a thing that I think we've really seen deteriorate in the last 5 decades.
Absolutely. And you also mentioned in this article, rightly so, that the family is not merely one interest group among many. I mean, this isn't just a constituency or people who, choose to participate in families like they might choose to participate in other types of interest groups and things. I mean, this is something that is so fundamental to not just the core of society, but also the core of the truth of the gospel. And, it's the foundational institution on which, the church, the culture, the economy, and even liberty all rest. And so, when we're talking about the resurrection power this week, you've also mentioned here, and I love how you phrase this, the resurrection power renews the covenantal order God established from the beginning, equipping men to lead their households biblically. And the same power that raised Christ from the dead is able to heal marriages, strengthen fathers, rebuild homes, and restore nations. And I think especially this week in 2026, we need to not look at Easter Sunday and that hope in isolation from the rest of what's going on in our daily lives.
Yeah, very well said. Not, and I think it all starts at, as you said, at home. It starts with us looking at as parents, as husbands and wives, as mothers and fathers, that we have the strength of Christ in us. We have the strength of the gospel. We don't need to depend on the institutional systems that society often, they provide, but those often work against us. We need to sort of almost have a rededication and a recommitment to the core family and family values across this country. That's what we're really reaching out and calling on pastors to remind everybody that Christ died, yes, absolutely, to cover our sins, but he reminded us, he said he came that we would have life and have it more abundant, and you can't find life more abundant than when you have a solid family together during this holiday time.
Yeah, and and it's a really great thing that the spiritual and cultural renewal seems to at least be underway in a certain segment of Gen Z. It seems like some of these young men are more focused on things of the family. They want to get married. They want to be the providers. They want to run households, and that's an encouraging trend among younger people comparatively to what we've experienced in the last, maybe several generations. And the church has a real opportunity, and I think religious broadcasters as well, speaking to your and my groups as well, that we have a really important opportunity to cultivate that and to encourage young people to be part of the family and to focus on that more than just their careers or their lifestyles or anything else that the secular world has sold them.
Yeah, and that is a real encouragement. And we've been hearing that from ministries across the country, not just looking at some of the data alone, but that young men and young women are looking to reconnect to those spiritual roots. And one of the things that they really want, it keeps getting repeated over and over and over again in our conversations and studies we've done, is they're looking for encouragement and they're looking for purpose, but they really want to understand how to have meaningful relationships and how to have solid relationships in kind of this virtual world we've created, Jenna, out there. We sort of, all of our relationships are these very superficial virtual relationships. And we found that this Gen Z community is really, as you said, they're looking to restore. I think they realize, maybe as I did growing up, that you're missing something in your life. And yes, it's a relationship with God, but you're also missing that solid, strong connection that you have with families. And you only get when you're together with your family. And it's not about the hustle of running kids to this soccer or that thing or that thing. It's about the family together, maybe around the dinner table or together doing a Bible study, or just the family actually moving through life together rather than just a group that's moving through life individually.
Yeah, and absolutely. And there is community, there's purpose, there's meaning, and there's design and order behind the family unit that you can't just get as one single individual. And our society, as much, and even conservatives are guilty of this, as much as we, focus on individual rights, we focus on, the needs of the individual instead of collectivism. That's all good. All of those things are good. We can tend to focus too much just on the individual and individual desires instead of recognizing that the design and the order that God himself put forward is for the design of the family. So just in the last minute or so we have with you, Trey Miller, and I just love this piece and I really appreciate you coming on today. And everyone needs to read this piece in Newsmax and share it perhaps with your pastor. Nation's strength is grounded in strong families. That's in Newsmax. How would you encourage people to take advantage of this Easter Sunday in emphasizing the purpose and the design of the family?
Yeah, first of all, Jenna, get together, have a family gathering. We've seen that the statistics are down of families that actually just get together and have a meal together. Get together as your family, have that gathering, have that meal together, shut off all the devices, put the phones in a basket, tell the Easter story, as you said, attend your church services. A lot of churches have Thursday, Friday, some even Saturday and Sunday services, but do it together as a family. And maybe look at this time of the resurrection, this time of new beginnings, to be a new beginning in your family as well, and a recommitment to the focus on the family, to the family strength that we have. And I think the greatest fulfillment we will find is when we have strong families across this country. Our jobs, our careers, anything else is not going to give us that same fulfillment of that strong, solid family going through life together.
Amen. So well said. Well, we've got to take a break here, but it's so true that for all of the things that the world sells you of, climbing the corporate ladder, your career path, your possessions, your, being the dank, the dual income, no kids, and all of these other things. When you are living life separate from God's design, then you will not be as fulfilled and living life as abundantly as Troy mentioned. The Bible says, if you don't follow God's order and his design. And so what an encouragement for the start of this Holy Week. And I really appreciate it, Troy Miller and National Religious Broadcasters. We appreciate being part of that organization, and we will be right back with more.
Without even seeing them show up, I could feel like the darkness.
Jamie Sanchez is another Christian business proprietor who has been targeted for his faith. His Drip Cafe was opened to serve and help the homeless of downtown Denver.
We believe sex outside of marriage and homosexuality is a sin in God's eyes. And the enemy and his minions decided to use that as a platform.
Jesus told us persecution would come.
I would see them, just the rage and the hate. I pictured them doing that at the foot of the cross to Jesus. And I just remembered what he said, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." And so I had to position my heart that way.
The Jamie Sanchez story is one of the videos of the Impact series at stream.afa.net.
It's been a crazy, crazy ride.
See Jamie's story and much more at stream.afa.net. How do you stop the enemy from taking away our Christian freedoms, stealing the innocence of our children, and destroying the moral foundation given by God for our country? Knowledge. Hosea 4:6 tells us God's people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. It opens us up to believing false teachings and other traps laid for us by Satan. A great way to change that is AFA Activate, an in-depth training course you take in the comfort of your home. You can start anytime because the lessons are available online or by DVD. 13 of the best professors, including Ed Vitagliano, Abraham Hamilton III, and Rob West, will take you through 18 Bible-based sessions that break down the issues AFA deals with every day, so the sanctity of life, marriage and family, religious liberty, and stewardship come alive and have more meaning. We also include the resources you need to apply what you learn, including full access to AFA Stream for a year. Go to activate.afa.net for all the details.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes. Stand by for news and commentary next. When I was a kid, there was a rule during supper time: no television and no phone calls. We were expected to sit down around the table and enjoy a meal together. According to the Food Industry Association, more than 80% of American families still gather around the table, but many are distracted. Only 1/4 say family meals are free from cell phones. That means most Americans are busy texting in between bites of stovetop stuffing. But Chick-fil-A wants to change that new norm in American culture. Many of their restaurants now urging families to take the cell phone challenge. Families encouraged to put away their phones and enjoy a meal together. Those who do get a delicious ice dream cone. President Reagan once said that all great change in America begins at the dinner table. Maybe we should take up Chick-fil-A's challenge and embrace President Reagan's message and start a conversation in America at supper time. I'm Todd Starnes.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, we're headed into April tomorrow, and the Iran conflict is still ongoing. And the latest headline from CNN is Iran threatens to rain fire on U.S. troops as possible ground war looms. This is something that a lot of us actually did not think that President Trump would actually go to, which is boots on the ground. And it looks increasingly like that is going to be more and more of a possibility. And even our very own Walker Wildman, who does have an X account, I'd encourage you all to go and follow him as well. This came up in my highlights yesterday. He posted, "I'm growing more uncomfortable with this Iran conflict as the days go on. How exactly does this end?" I think that's a really apt question, and the answer to that, of course, has to be in, well, what are the goals? And I'm not really sure that the goals are being sufficiently and particularly articulated, perhaps as well as the White House may wish to do that or thinks that it is. But let's welcome in Joel Rosenberg. He's the host of the Rosenberg Report and, of course, the editor-in-chief of All Israel News at allisrael.com. And Joel, you're kind of right in the thick of this with going back and forth to Jerusalem. So, from your perspective, it seems to be that at least on the American front, there is increasing discomfort with this ongoing conflict. How do you see it?
Great to be with you, Jenna, and greetings from Jerusalem as we are just heading into Passover tomorrow and, of course, into Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday. So we're trying to stay focused on faith here, but you're right, we're under missile attack, but we're pressing the offensive. And I would say we're seeing tremendous victory, tremendous success so far. All right, we're not at victory yet, but it's really a miraculous measure of success that the United States and Israel are waging and achieving so far. And I see polling that says that Americans do support this war, and that Republicans overwhelmingly support this war, and that MAGA supports it more than everybody. There's almost nobody in the MAGA movement that doesn't think this is the right thing to do. Now, is it hard? Yes. Is it messy? Yes. Are we seeing some casualties? We are. Here in Israel, we just woke up this morning at 5:30 morning to another missile barrage, and Lynn and I were in our bomb shelter, and that's happening all around our country all day long. But I think, look, there are two things that still have to happen in terms of destroying Iran's missile launch capacity. That is significantly advanced. There's more to do. Yes. So we probably need several weeks more of bombings to stop their missiles, their missile launchers, and their ability to produce missiles. That's also true about their suicide drone launches, right? We have to wipe that out. Those drone launches are down about 83%, but we're not there, totally yet. Okay, so we've shattered the regime. We've assassinated, dozens and dozens and dozens of the top most powerful, most wicked leaders, including the so-called self-proclaimed supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. These are all good, and it's astonishing in just 5 weeks of work, right? So what do we still have to do? Well, this war is not going to be victorious unless at least two things are happening. First, you'll recall that Steve Witkoff, the President Trump's chief negotiator with Jared Kushner, he told us all publicly that the Iranians were bragging in negotiations before Operation Epic Fury began that the Iranians had 460 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, enough, they bragged, to build 11 nuclear bombs, or nuclear warheads. Well, we cannot let that stay inside Iran. The United States and Israel has to identify exactly where that is, and we have to go get it. I mean, if there's a negotiation and they're just willing to hand it over, fine. But we can't end this war with Iran's, shattered, tattered regime still having enough highly enriched uranium to build 11 nuclear warheads. They're either going to build them themselves or they're going to sell them to terrorists. So we can't. We've got to make sure we get that back. And the second thing is we can't let the Strait of Hormuz be in control of the Iranian, whatever is left of the Iranian military and regime, right? We can't have 20% of the world's oil and gas supplies being held hostage, essentially, by not being able to move safely through the Strait of Hormuz out of the Gulf into the Indian Ocean and onto Europe, Asia, or wherever else it needs to go. So those are two big things. But I'm encouraged, and I'm astonished when I'm in the States and even watching from here, how the mainstream media and so much of social media is acting like the United States and Israel are losing this thing. Nothing could be further from the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, we obviously take anything that the mainstream media says with a huge grain of salt because they're going to want to interpret any of the facts in the light most disfavorable to President Trump and Israel, and we know that. And increasingly, unfortunately, some people on the right are kind of doing the same thing. But I think, Joel Rosenberg, what you articulate as kind of these two primary goals or things that are still left to be done, that makes a lot of sense. And when we started this conflict by saying, there was an immediate necessity to ensure that Iran was not going to have these nuclear warheads. There was that imminent threat, which is what the White House used to justify that initial conflict, and to ensure that they sufficiently remove that threat is in my opinion, at least, a valid goal. And that's certainly something that makes sense on the global stage. It makes sense for American interests and as well as all of Western nations. And so how do you think we know when that point has been reached, though? Because, President Trump isn't for kind of these decades-long wars. He doesn't want to be a wartime president. This is something that I've seen from the beginning, kind of a conflict that would be minimized as much as possible. I mean, he loves to declare that he won, so he's not going to try to perpetuate this conflict, I think, any further than it needs to be. But, when we're talking about things like boots on the ground and actually sending American soldiers over to this conflict, I mean, I think that does change the equation a little bit and the calculation as far as the value and what the overall timeline is.
I don't think it does, actually. I understand why. If we were talking about President Trump deciding to send 250,000 or 500,000 American boots on the ground into Iran to invade, occupy, like we did in the Iraq War, then I would say, okay, nobody wants to go back to that. However, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about several tens of thousands of special forces, highly trained American operators from the Marines, from the 82nd Airborne, probably from other elite units, Delta and so forth, going and doing these two missions. One, getting the 460 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. We believe that's under the rubble of one of the main Iranian nuclear weapons facilities that we bombed so aggressively and effectively. The good news is we think that the highly enriched uranium is trapped. The bad news is somebody could go dig it out, and it ought to be us, I think. I mean, so it's not as simple as just sending people in to go get it. You're going to have to secure the area long enough, and bring in, and get equipment and all the stuff that you need to do in order to dig it out and make sure you have it and you transport it out safely. That could take a few weeks. Let's just be honest. But what's the alternative? Leaving 11 nuclear bombs worth of enriched uranium for the Iranians to get later after we leave, after Trump leaves office? No, that would be unacceptable. The other thing, of course, is securing the both sides of the Strait of Hormuz and making sure that is safe for oil and other shipping to go through. And the good news is, and I'm very encouraged by this, the moderate Arab states that said they weren't going to get involved in this operation at all have shifted because Iran has attacked 17 different countries. All of whom are Muslim except for Israel, right? And so the Arabs have realized there's no going back. We have to help the United States finish this off and secure free shipping through that passage, that strategic choke point. And so the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain have both said they are willing to be part of all the military efforts involved in securing the freedom of passage, the freedom of maneuver through the Strait of Hormuz. And I think the Saudis are going to join on as well. They haven't announced that publicly, but I think they're watching to see President Trump put his plan together, General Kane, and his team, and Pete Hegseth, get that operation just right. I heard the president say yesterday that maybe he told somebody, the Wall Street Journal, I guess, reported that Trump was telling aides that maybe that he could finish this thing without securing the Strait of Hormuz. I think that is fake news at the highest possible level. There's no way President Trump, of all people, is going to allow what's left of the Iranian regime, hijack the Strait of Hormuz and drive up oil prices to $200, $250 a barrel or whatever. So that will require some forces, but that's not like saying we're going to put hundreds and hundreds of thousands in forever. Ultimately, the Arabs will control that under our supervision, and that would be a great success.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, and I think you're in some sense, I think, articulating this better than even the press secretary in terms of understanding the pieces here and what the goals are and giving kind of these clean margins. And I can see the
she is just about to have a baby, so let's give her a lot of
valid. All right. We will. But but I can see the distinction certainly between sending in just some of the special forces versus hundreds of thousands of the regular just enlisted boots on the ground. That is a difference in practicality and in reality. But do you think politically the perception is still the same, and that's more where Trump is losing some of that support, is with just the political calculations and the perception?
I don't see the president losing support. He's lost the entire Democratic Party, but that's...
Well, has he ever had those? Yeah, has he ever had them?
Independents are hugely important, and we don't have their confidence right now. But usually, victory is what matters. Like if you ask people a month before the Venezuela operation, should we spend special forces to arrest Nicolas Maduro right in the middle of the most dangerous and highly secured military facility and in all of the capital of Venezuela? I think you get very low numbers even from Republicans. But once you do it, and you do it well, and it goes off super well, you're like, oh, well, no, I support victory. Right? I support doing the right thing if it works out. I think independents will move back into the, hey, we love victory. We love America first. America's strong, peace through strength. But they're nervous right now because they're not ideologically committed to this president, and they're not personally committed to this president. So they're nervous. They're nervous for a whole list of things that could go wrong, and those are not illegitimate concerns. The fact is, though, they're not going wrong. Everything is going right in this military battle so far. Yes, there have been some casualties. I don't treat that lightly. My own son is in the Israeli army in a combat unit here, and he just had to go to a funeral 2 nights ago because one of his friends was killed in southern Lebanon fighting Hezbollah. So we know the pain and the cost of war. Okay, so I'm not taking it lightly, but in the grand scheme of things, this war is going. We are heading towards an Operation Epic Victory. Like that's what they're going to have to rename this, not Epic Fury, but Epic Victory. This is one of the huge tectonic changes that are changing the Middle East for the better. But we're not done. The key is this. When you look at the polling, always look at the Republican numbers and then look at the MAGA numbers, right? I'd be worried if I thought that the Tucker Carlson faction, the Megyn Kelly, the Candace Owens faction of the Republican Party or the right wing was actually winning the argument. They're awfully loud, but they're not winning the argument. You've got like 98% MAGA support for the president. One poll said it was 100%. Okay, maybe. But the point is we're not seeing a fracturing. Why? Because this is not something that Trump is doing because he woke up one morning and decided, he didn't have anything better to do. This is 47 years of the Iranian radical Islamists taking Americans hostage in 1979, killing Americans in the Beirut bombing of 1983, and killing and wounding and maiming Americans in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and all over the world ever since, including trying to assassinate President Trump. So we've got 47 years of Americans, especially Republicans and conservatives. We know how horrifying and evil and wicked the Iranian regime is. And we think, what if they were firing at 17 different countries, including at American bases and so forth, with nuclear warheads? Americans have understood this, at least conservative Americans, evangelicals have understood this for 47 years. And we finally have an American president who's serious, like, well, I'm not going to allow this to continue. I gave them every chance. I gave the Iranians every chance to negotiate a peaceful solution, and they basically spit in my face. So, okay, we gave them every chance. I like that President Trump is not, doesn't have a trigger finger, right? He's not like eager to get into the fight. And he is eager to end this, but he's not going to cut loose quickly. He wants to win, and he's very close to winning. And I will say, for all the Israel haters out there and all the Jew haters, Israel is proving itself the number one best ally that the United States has ever had. Where's NATO in all this? Where's Spain? Spain won't even let the United States use its bases or fly over the country. It's a NATO member, and we're in a fight against a almost nuclear-armed power. President Trump is doing the right thing. He's got great allies, not only Israel, but the Arabs have kicked in, and they're joining the fight, and they're doing a great job defending their countries and our forces, shooting down about 95% of every missile and drone that's fired at them. Israel shot down about 92%. Our numbers are a little bit lower, but we're still doing a great job. This is impressive. There are 700,000 Americans who live in Israel, and Israel is a country that the Iranian regime threatens to annihilate, to liquidate, to commit genocide with. So I think the president is doing a great job. We've got to give him space. We've got to pray for him and let him finish the job and support him as he does it.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Joel Rosenberg, that Trump doesn't kind of have the trigger happy finger, which is very good. He also isn't one of these parents in the room that's counting to 5 and then 10, and and none of our foreign adversaries think that he's actually serious. I mean, that's one of the things that even in his first term, everybody on the world stage knew that if Trump says he's going to do something or he issues, a threat, that you can bank on that, and you can count on him to follow through on that. And that counts for a lot, I think, in terms of ultimately the goal here, of course, is disarmament of all of the nuclear warheads. But, he wants to bring peace to the Middle East. And part of that is ensuring that they know that there's someone who is more powerful than they are. So that's really incredibly important. We've got to take a break here. So much more to talk to you about, though, Joel Rosenberg. So we'll have to have you on again soon. But, really appreciate your time. And we are looking at All Israel News. You can go to allisraelnews.com, of course, for some of those headlines that are right there in Jerusalem, and a lot of great reporters that Joel has on his staff. So, beyond our own American family news, of course, that's always the outlet that I go to more than anything else to see perspective on what's going on in Iran, Israel, the Middle East, all of that, because you're getting it from a solid biblical worldview perspective and just good, honest journalism. So thanks so much, Joel Rosenberg, and we will be right back with more.
The biblical principles our nation was founded upon are under attack.
They're trying to change the whole course of our understanding about the way things are about our own country.
Sandy Rios.
They're trying to untether us from our Constitution and certainly from our God.
Trust Sandy Rios to bring you unfiltered, insightful commentary from a Christian worldview. Find her podcast titled Sandy Rios 24/7 online at afr.net.
For more than 150 years, Blue Mountain Christian University has been committed to educating students through a Christian worldview rooted in Scripture and truth. Our close-knit campus community, affordable degree options, and dedicated faculty prepare students for lives of faith, leadership, and service. With on-campus and online programs, BMCU meets students where they are without compromising what matters most. Learn more at bmc.edu and move mountains with Blue Mountain Christian University.
Rejoice with those who rejoice. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Michael, a 5-year-old boy, showed up at the courthouse in Grand Rapids, Michigan for an adoption hearing with his foster parents, and he had a crowd of unusual supporters. Michael's entire kindergarten class sat in the audience behind him, waving big red hearts mounted on wooden sticks to show their support. The kindergartners offered the most touching answers, standing up and telling the court, "I love Michael," or "Michael's my best friend." Michael's new father and mother had been married nearly 10 years, and he'd been living with them as a foster child for more than a year. Adoption truly is at the heart of the gospel.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner, or visit the podcast page at afr.net for more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
Let's see, if something costs less, a lot less, but people are actually happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MetaShare. Maybe you've heard joining MetaShare can save you or your family up to $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true. People are just happier with it. They love being part of something that reflects and promotes their values and what they believe in. MetaShare works, too. It's been around for 30 years now, and members have shared more than $7 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network, so yeah, really, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care, whether you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan that you're happy with. Here you go. You can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. It's 833-44-BIBLE. That's 833-44-BIBLE. 833-44-BIBLE.
Welcome back to Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio.
Welcome back. Well, this past weekend in Dallas, Texas, CPAC occurred, and a lot came out of that. We'll be talking probably more about some of those events later on this week. But the former Tarrant County GOP chair, Beau French, made headlines, of course, and inflamed a lot of liberals by suggesting that that America should deport around 100 million people. And according to the Texas Tribune, Beau French said Friday that Republicans should, quote, more openly embrace Islamophobia, which is, of course, the leftist way of articulating that. But let's welcome in the man himself. So, Beau, I think I see where you're going with this and where the Texas Tribune kind of manipulated your words there. But so overall, I think that we need to not Sharia law not only Texas or Florida or anywhere in the United States. And what happened to the call for mass deportations?
Good morning, Jenna. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, it did make kind of some headlines, but look, I just think elected officials need to speak the truth about what's happening in America. You know, last administration, under the Biden administration, he let in roughly 20 million illegal aliens. Estimates are as high as there's 50 million illegal aliens in the United States. In August of last year, the State Department released a report saying they were reviewing 55 million foreign visa applications. And so I think Americans are like, you know, just as you walk around your neighborhoods and the grocery stores and the hospitals and public schools, and you just see how many foreigners there suddenly seem to be in America. I think there's the sense that we are losing our culture. our American culture, our Christian culture. And so I don't know what the exact number is, of course, but the president, ran on a platform of mass deportations. I think some people are frustrated that it's not happening quickly enough. I know the Trump administration has done amazing and great things and still continues to do so. But there is a sense that we need to be doing more. And so, I think my quote kind of made a headline and woke a lot of people up and shocked a lot of people. But, I mean, by estimates, there are roughly 100 million people in the country who probably shouldn't be here. And so what we do with those, I don't know, but certainly mass deporting a good chunk of those would be helpful.
Yeah, and, it's fascinating to see that we're in this argument right now with the leftists. And of course, the Democrats are the ones that want to import a lot of people for the purpose of undermining our culture, our values, and of course, our elections as well. But they're calling this Islamophobia. And the same thing as, saying that, well, you're just, you just have homophobia or, some of these other things like, no, we're not scared of them. We're not using this in a personal derogatory way. It's nothing like that. But they refuse to actually look at what the right is arguing for when we're saying there are certain people who come here that aren't assimilating. They don't share our culture. They don't share our values. They're often in a lot of cases are committing violent crimes and committing, fraud, like what we saw in Minnesota, what we've seen, prolifically throughout the country. And why should we want, that type of mentality and that type of individual here? And it comes from this weird presumption that somehow everybody else deserves to be here just because they want to. And that's not good enough. And so I'm really tired of people suggesting that this is Islamophobia instead of saying, no, we're pro-Constitution, we're pro-American law, and we're pro-American culture and values.
Well, I mean, we are certainly battling that here in Texas as well, just like they are in Minnesota. But, Islamophobia to me is just the recognition that Muslims openly admit that they are here for jihad. Well, look around the world at what jihad looks like elsewhere. We don't want that here. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, we're being criticized because we're just saying we don't want them to do what they admit that they are in fact doing. The violence, the takeover, the installing of Sharia law as some form of government superior to our Constitution, really antithetical to our Constitution. So for all of these reasons, I think, people are just waking up to this reality that our culture is under attack. These jihadists are here to attack it. And, I mean, we're just a few years behind a lot of European countries, I would argue. And look how bad things are there. We don't want that here. So we have to do something about it. I'm glad that everyone's talking about it. I was really criticized a couple of years ago when I was talking about it. It seemed like not very many other people were, certainly no elected officials. And fortunately, in this campaign season, at least here in Texas, I think every candidate was talking about it in some way. And now we have a, Sharia-free caucus in Congress, a Sharia-free caucus in the Texas legislature, and people are talking about this. But, to me, it's not just Sharia. It's the entire culture and worldview of the Muslims who are here and who've come here and who openly talk about conquering us and putting us all under the umbrella of Islam and their Allah. So I just think it's, Islamophobia, call it what you want. They use it as a pejorative. I use it as an admission that we just don't want to be submitted to their God and to their religion and to their culture. Because the consequence of that is if you don't submit under the Quran, they're allowed to kill you. And so I think most Americans would find that something we don't want.
Yeah, and this seems just very obvious, and it seems like just like the question of what is a woman, we shouldn't be debating this in 2026. And so how did you find the reception among at least the CPAC attendees, because these should be people that are in the Republican base, mostly obviously out of Texas. I mean, a lot of people did fly in from other places, but they're in Dallas, and are you seeing that people at least in the Republican base get this?
Yeah, it's funny walking around CPAC. You probably know this, but I'm currently in a runoff for a statewide position in Texas called the Railroad Commission, which is the oil and gas regulator. And just walking through the crowds, every now and then someone would stop me and say, "Really appreciate what you're doing and good luck in your race." And after my speech, I literally couldn't walk anywhere without lines of people trying to stop me and talk to me because they were so appreciative of my willingness to just be bold and say what they all already know. I've been traveling around the state in this campaign, going to, various grassroots events. And every time I speak in front of a group, I ask them, how many of you are concerned about the Islamification of Texas? Without fail, 100% of the people in the room raise their hand. So this is an issue that Texans care about, our voters care about. I'm glad that the candidates are now openly talking about it, and some elected officials are openly talking about it. But the talk is one thing and action is another. So I'm excited as we move a little bit further along in this process to see what our elected leaders actually do.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of elected leaders, the Senate race is kind of the big one that everyone is looking at in Texas between either Cornyn or Ken Paxton versus James Tallarico. And, to see how that shapes up, especially in the primary initially, but then overall in the general, I mean, that's going to be very interesting. And I think perhaps be a bellwether for Texas.
Yeah, remember that Texas hasn't elected a statewide Democrat in 35 years. I don't see that happening this time either. The closest we came in a long time was the 2018 race with Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. But, Ted Cruz, I think, just sort of cruised along in that campaign and didn't really run a campaign until really, 6 weeks before Election Day, which is probably why that race was so close. We won't make that mistake as Republicans in Texas again. I think in the primary between Cornyn and Paxton, remember 60% of the primary voters already voted against John Cornyn. So he looks to be in real trouble. He's not loved by the grassroots, and Ken Paxton is seen as the America First warrior that, defended and fought for Donald Trump's agenda. So I think that's going to play very well for him. So he will likely be the nominee come May 26th when we have our runoff election. And then in the general, that was the Democrat race was between Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico, neither of which are very inspiring candidates to certain segments of the Democrat Party. I don't think that, sort of the effeminate, scripture-twisting James Tallarico is going to go very far among his base. And I don't think he's really going to excite a lot of people, even though he's very smooth talking, kind of like Obama was. So that might help him to some extent. But really, the contrast couldn't be more clear. Between someone who really embraces sort of the gay race communist agenda versus an America First warrior.
Yeah, well, let's hope and pray for the sake of Texas and also America that voters get out, not just in the primaries in Texas, here in Florida, every state. Make sure you're voting in your primaries, but also in the general election. And hopefully we keep an element of sanity on some of these things, like being able to say, yeah, Sharia law has no business in America where our Constitution is the law of the land. But as always, you can reach me and my team, Jenna, at afr.net.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family